How do you think future generations of Iranians will view your 37 years?
The truth and the reality of history could not be kept always in the shadows. That is impossible. Truth will come out. In any case, sooner or later.
And at that point, in 50 years' time, how will future Iranians judge you?
50 years, I hope it will be sooner than that.
Well, whenever, I was saying, how will your people, after a period, judge you?
Well, if they read history, they will see what it was before my father, what it was when I took over, and what it was when I left.
Hi folks, hope you're doing well today. Depending on who you ask, the Pahlavis were the greatest thing that ever happened to Iran and the greatest Iranic dynasty there ever was, next to the Achaemenids. Others feel that they were anything but that, and that they were actually a huge setback to the nation's path towards modernity and democracy, and a regression back into absolutism and autocracy. There isn't a single Iranic state and dynasty that's universally liked by everyone, not even the Achaemenids. I'll confess that my personal views and feelings towards the Pahlavis and their legacy are conflicted. That would be the best way of describing them. I've studied them on and off since roughly middle school.
So all those forces which were liberated and we should have established this beautiful democracy, where are they today? And as I said, either outside the country or in hiding. 1.5 million people, Iranians, have left the country. Not only the rich people, but the best brains of the country, the best minds of the country, they have all left. Everybody who can leave the country is leaving the country. So where are those people in the Bar Association and in other places who were promising democracy and these things? Where are they today?
Reading about all the stuff that they did during their reign, there are some instances where I laud them and other instances where I bash them. A couple of days ago, on my Twitter page, I posted a poll asking the following question: has history rehabilitated the Pahlavis? And the majority of the people who voted said yes, they have. I'm guessing that the people who said no loathe them for their policies and decision-making, and this does indeed exemplify the contentious issues that come with studying the Pahlavis and looking back on their enduring legacy in Iran and the rest of the world. For as consequential of a dynasty as they were, arguably the most consequential dynasty on a global scale since the Achaemenids, they didn't last. The reasons why their dynasty, as well as the Iranian monarchy, collapsed are arguably still being debated to this day. If you're interested in investigating that issue, the best book that I would recommend to you is Abbas Milani's The Shah, which is, in my estimation, the most well-researched, the most unbiased, the most objective, and the most detailed book about them, specifically about Mohammad Reza Shah, that's ever been published. Milani is a king in the field of Iranology for a reason.
Iran is anything but the archetypal Middle Eastern country. In many ways, they're already massively motherfucking westernized. Do a quick YouTube search, in Farsi or fucking otherwise, for Pahlavis Iran nostalgia, and prepare to pound down page after page of Iranian citizens longing for the glory days of their puppet, the Shah. Some of the most popular memes in Iran consist of before and after fucking Polaroids of sprawling resorts, bustling beaches, and town squares and the like, from before the Iranians were made a vassal state of revolted.
If I were to tell you that most of us believe that things were better under the Shah and under the Pahlavis than they currently are under the Islamic Republic, I would be speaking disingenuously, because honestly, I don't actually talk to that many Iranians, Afghans, or Kurds in real life that much at all. But whenever I do, their political views and positions aren't exactly the first thing that I'd be discussing with them. I'm not the sort of guy who needs to confirm whether you're a monarchist or a pan-Iranist or an Islamist or an anti-feminist conservative first before I decide to fuck with you or not. But there is a diversity of opinion, both at home and among the diaspora. Regardless of your opinion of this dynasty, Iranic history is filled with a series of down endings and catastrophes, and generally one L after another. But how should we objectively frame the legacy of the last Pahlavi ruler, Mohammad Reza Shah, whose government and state is responsible for the monarchy's death in retrospect? Let's ask the author, Amir Tahiri. The Shah described the modernization of Iran as the principal goal of his life, and yet he adamantly refused to see that there could be no veritable modernization without democracy. He often referred to his Swiss education as part of his credentials as a profoundly committed Democrat, but was, at the same time, convinced that Iran was not yet ripe for democracy, and that it was his duty as the father of the nation to save the Iranians from a slothful life of prayer, pilgrimage, small commerce, backward farming, and cottage industry. He also wanted to turn Iran into a second Japan, make her one of the 5 or 6 major world powers by the end of the century. He regarded himself as the custodian of Iran's grandeur and freedom, and in later years he extended his self-proclaimed mission of saving Iran to include the entire world. More than a decade after the Shah's death, it's no longer necessary to be for or against him on all matters. How could one be for or against everything that happened during a reign of nearly 38 years? How could Iranians not be for him when he fought over Azerbaijan, or when he gave the royal assent to the bill that nationalized Iran's oil? How could one be against the principle of land reform, or the enhancement of women's status? And did he not deserve support when he fought for a more just system of production and pricing for oil, which he called a noble substance? But how could anyone be for him when he closed all doors on discussion and debate and effectively drove many intelligent and patriotic Iranians into the arms of reactionary mullahs? And how could one approve of the unchecked intervention of the Savak secret police in virtually all aspects of life, especially in the 1970s? Last but not least, it would be difficult to understand, much less to justify, his almost pathological belief that only the major powers were capable of either protecting or destabilizing his regime. Since the Persian monarchy began some 2,550 years ago, Iran has had more than 350 kings. No fewer than half of them were either assassinated or killed in battle. Many went into exile to escape death. Iran's long history is full of falling crowns and shattered imperial dreams. Of Mohammad Reza Shah's 5 immediate predecessors, 1 was assassinated and 3 were forced into exile. What makes Mohammad Reza Shah's tragedy special is that he was perhaps the first Iranian king in more than a century to have a real possibility of ending his reign peacefully and dying in his own country. That this was not the case was, to a large extent, the result of Iran's chronic political underdevelopment, but the Shah's own failure to operate within the realities of Iranian society, unpleasant as they undoubtedly were, contributed to his downfall and its dramatic consequences for the nation as a whole. The fall of the Shah was, in a sense, the prelude to more than a decade of instability in the region, culminating in the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait and the subsequent massacre of Kurds and Shiites in Mesopotamia. It may take Iran and her region many more years before the shockwaves unleashed by the fall of the Shah are fully absorbed. I'd just like to add a quick comment on that last part. In 2022, arguably, the region still hasn't absorbed the shockwaves of the 1979 revolution. Nevertheless, that's an excellent breakdown of Mohammad Reza's legacy, and to further touch upon this subject, I'll leave it to Harvey Dent to provide some insight.
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
They made many mistakes, but they still are the fathers of our modern country, and the enduring legacy of the good things that they did do outweigh the bad stuff that they did. Imagining an Iran without the Pahlavis ever having existed is nearly the equivalent of imagining the West without ancient Greece and Rome ever existing, because our historical experience in the 20th century was unlike any other preceding chapter in our history. More developments and breakthroughs of enduring value, more stuff of enduring value and substance has come to us in the last several decades and since the turn of the 21st century than the last 2,000 years, than the last 3,000 years of Iranic history have produced. If you think that that claim is inaccurate or disingenuous or contains a shred of post-modernist chauvinism, you're lying to yourself. Moreover, the Islamic Republic literally exists because of the Pahlavis and its reaction to their legacy. And this is where I end my dissertation. Thank you for watching.